Hello guys, and welcome back. Today I want to make my Calder Trophy predictions for the 2026 NHL season, going through my top 15 candidates from number 15 to number 1 to see who I think is most likely to win the Calder Trophy this next year. We're not just going to be factoring in how good of a prospect these guys are, we're also going to be factoring in what time on ice they could end up getting, the deployment with power play with even strength, the teammates they'll be around. A lot is going to be factoring into today's video, but let's get right into it. And of course, before we do that, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button for more hockey videos just like this and rankings as we do a ton more throughout this NHL offseason. Now, this Calder Trophy race could be extremely deep, and there are a ton of prospects I'm not even going to mention inside the top 15. Artem Levshunov is one, but you can just go down the list. Callum Ritchie, Gabe Perreault, Oliver Moore, Rutger McGrody, Jonathan Lekaramaki, then Levshunov, Sam Dickinson, even Dmitry Sibyshev I could see winning a spot and potentially being a Calder candidate. Most of these honorable mentions are guys that I see being full-time AHLers this next year, but again, if one of them pops out of nowhere, we could easily see that happen. But let's get started with my top 15 Calder candidates for this next season and start out with first overall pick Matthew Schaefer out of the 2025 NHL draft. Now, I could see a 25% chance of him actually sticking with the Islanders, and if he does, I think it could be a decent Calder candidate. I don't think it's going to be anything exceptional or anything. I think he'll likely hover around 30 points or so, but still as a defenseman will have a shot at making it. Though, I think most likely he will either be in the OHL or the NCAA this next season, and considering how little games he played, how young he is as a prospect, personally, that's the decision I will be making. No matter how good he plays, I think he should be playing somewhere else other than the NHL this next year to just get his feet under him and really start to fill out that potential and really just play more games than he could have usually. But even though I think he might be okay in the NHL, I don't think he'd truly thrive there, which is why I think he's a bit lower on this list than some people expect. Moving on to number 14, we go on to a pretty similar position here in Michael Misa, the second overall pick in the 2025 draft of the San Jose Sharks. Now, I do think Misa is a lot more likely to be an everyday NHLer than a player like a Matthew Schaefer, just because the position is open, and I also do think Misa is the most NHL ready out of all the prospects in that class. Somebody that has really nothing else to learn in the OHL level, which I think is the biggest thing that could point to him staying with the Sharks long term. Though, of course, if he doesn't, I think the NCAA would also be a pretty good spot for him, but 134 points in 65 games in the OHL. It's either NHL or the NCAA, I think, for Misa, but I could pretty easily see him winning maybe that third line center spot or maybe being up in the lineup as a wing to start out. And considering how much fun San Jose likes to have with the younger players, how good they've already developed a ton of them, I can see that being good for Misa long term. Like a Schaefer, though, even if he does end up making it long term, I don't think he's going to be an immediate impact piece, but something that I think could be a pretty decent 30, 35, maybe even 40-point guy if he's playing with the right players, aka Macklin Celebrini. On to number 13, and this is something that I was debating potentially even having outside the top 15, because the more I think about it, the more I think he could be in the AHL next year, but I'm going to still have Axel Sandine on this list. It's an unfortunate one because I think he is easily ready to play for the Red Wings, especially considering their defensive options right now, but I do think the Red Wings will still be a little bit more patient than maybe I would be with him and have him in the AHL most likely this next year. But if he does end up popping into training camps and actually looking good for the Red Wings, then I could see them having him in the NHL to begin with and maybe leading to the NHL for the rest of the season. But I do think the AHL might be the best thing for him long term to really hem in the defensive game and especially in the shorter ice, really be able to maximize his offense, really get used to that before he's thrown to the Wolves in the NHL level. But at the same time, I think the skill set is still radiant, and if he was given a true shot for next year, he'd probably be inside my top 10 pretty easily. I just love this guy. But of course, if he's in the AHL for most of the season this next year, he might become one of my Calder favorites for the next season afterwards, right up there with guys like Gavin McKenna and Keaton Bearhoff. Now, moving on to number 12, we're going to go into a player that I'm pretty confident will have a big-time opportunity in the NHL this next year. Let's go on to Nicolas Lefebvre of the Minnesota Wild, somebody that I think pretty similar to Michael Misa. If he does win the spot, I think could pretty easily be the third-line center for Minnesota behind Joel Eriksson Ek and Marco Rossi, but kind of more in a defensive role. I think Lefebvre could be pretty good in that role immediately, considering that's exactly the player he has come to be. Even though the offense has been really solid in the KHL up to this point, the smarts and how calculated of a guy he is in all three zones, I think is why he's going to be an immediately and pretty impactful piece for the Wild. I don't think he's going to be the best rookie in the world immediately, but I could see Europe putting up a pretty solid 30, 35 point season in that third line center spot. And if the Wild do decide to trade Marco Rossi down the line, I think Europe would make that a little bit more palatable. Still, would kind of piss me off. On to number 11, and a prospect that also might have some issues in terms of the NHL projectability this next year because of how stacked his team is around him. I still want to have Bradley Nadeau on this list though, because I could see him pretty easily winning a middle six spot next year in more of a sheltered power play role, maybe similarly to a Jackson Blake and what he was able to do this last year for Carolina. I think Nadeau is absolutely good enough to do it. It's just the depth that Carolina has on the wing that might make that a bit of an issue. The fact that they already have Seth Jarvis and Logan Stankovic and a player on top of that like Jackson Blake, who has emerged pretty well on the wings. In terms of the younger wingers coming up, you got a lot of options there already, but I think Nadeau could pretty easily be good enough considering how dominant he was as an AHLer this last year. 32 goals, 58 points in 64 games. He was just brilliant in terms of the goal scoring and how consistent he was, especially after the World Juniors. But I think Nadeau is still becoming a pretty solid player, still learning what he needs to be, but I think in a lot of ways, goal scoring wise, if you put him in more of a sheltered role, he could work out. But I think for a team like Carolina, they're less interested in doing so because of their contender status. Onto a team that would love to shelter players though right now on the younger side because of their status. We go on to the Pittsburgh Penguins, and I have an underrated pick here inside the top 10 in Ville Koivunen, somebody that I think has always been a pretty under the radar prospect as a second rounder in 2021, somebody that's just developed beautifully since his draft year, being a fantastic Liga player, and since entering the pro levels has been about as good as you can expect. In the AHL, almost a point per game player immediately, getting 56 points in 63 games, and when he was playing with the Penguins as well, got 7 assists, 7 points in 8 games, looking really comfortable already. I think Koivunen is more likely than even a player like Rutger McGrody to get a big opportunity next year for the Penguins. Considering how little options the Penguins have to work with, I think a player like Koivunen just makes so much sense to maybe immediately get a top 6 spot within that roster, and I think look pretty good doing it. Helpfully inside the top 10 though, let's go into my 9th best Calder candidate for 2026, and let's go on to Isaac Howard now of the Edmonton Oilers. Something going from Tampa to Edmonton is wanting to get that big spot inside the top 9, and I think in Edmonton, they'll have the opportunity to give it to him. I mean, they just traded Evander Kane, and I think Howard could come in a pretty similar goal scoring spot and make things work pretty well. I'm a big fan of him though in terms of the electricity, how good he is in transition, and how much he's able to carry a line off of his back. Obviously, that's been in the NCAA and not the NHL. So it will be a pretty big jump for him, but he's always handled pressure extremely well. The physical game, especially in the NCAA, has been a big point of progress over these last few years, but considering the high-end upside, the high-end offense, I could pretty easily see him getting a top 6 spot, and if he does, you're alongside McDavid, Draisaitl, some pretty great players to work with there immediately, and I think Howard could really benefit that, especially in the points department, which we all know matters a lot in the Calder race. This is the opportunity, though, for him to show what he's made of and try to prove Tampa wrong. I mean, if he doesn't end up making the team and getting sent down to the AHL, that'd be pretty brutal, because as of right now, this is Howard's time to really prove himself, and especially in Edmonton's system, I have little doubt that he'll be able to do so, because with the talent there and the opportunity, it's just a perfect mix for a great rookie season. Now we move quite a bit up here in terms of the likelihood for the Calder Trophy. Going on to number 8, let's go on to Alexander Nikishin of the Carolina Hurricanes. Now, Bradley Nadeau, if he does end up making it, I think it'll be a pretty solid rookie. Alexander Nikishin, though, I think is when we really start to get into the players I think could really win the Calder Trophy. I could easily see a situation where Nikishin really is able to have a great, solid foundational season with Carolina, and pretty easily do so. I mean, he's penciled in pretty easily now as the second pair defenseman there behind Keandre Miller. He's something that is going to get a lot of opportunity in that Carolina defense. Already has to a decent extent when he was playing in the playoffs. He had some pretty iffy moments there still, but I think that's just a learning moment for him in the North American game. I still think the goal scoring, the confidence, the physical attributes, there's a lot to like in Nikishin's game, and I think especially in his rookie season, he's one of the most mature and ready to dominate compared to a lot of the prospect we'll list today. Now let's move on to another Russian prospect here, and another Russian prospect from the 2020 draft in Yaroslav Askarov of the San Jose Sharks. Somebody that has had a long road here to become the starter at the NHL level, but I think this next year we're going to really start to see that, and I think it's going to be very deserved, because what Askarov has been able to prove in the last few seasons, just getting better and better in so many ways. You see, especially in the AHL level, a 923 save percentage this last year in 22 games. He wasn't unbelievable at the NHL level for the Sharks, but I think was able to tread water pretty well, and especially considering the defensive system and everything, to get around a 896 save percentage, I think is still quite solid for Askarov, and he was looking quite a bit better, especially in his first few games at the NHL level this last year. But I think this is the time for him to really step up, really show that he is a future NHL starter, and a lot rides on the Sharks' future here. If Askarov is able to really pop, then things look immediately better, and could really change the standings as well for the Sharks this next year. Honestly, I might even have Askarov a bit too low for his standards, but I've been burned before trying to predict goaltenders for the Calder Trophy. Really, Dustin Wolf has been the only one I've had a lot of confidence in that's actually really worked out, so I'm hoping that Askarov is able to prove me wrong here and be one of the top contenders for the Calder Trophy, because if he is, I really wouldn't be surprised. The problem, though, is that I look at that San Jose defense, and there's still a lot that's a work in progress, so hopefully Askarov won't be burned because of that, but I think he'll be able to succeed just fine, and especially for a full starter rookie season, I think looked great doing it. Just outside the top 5, though, let's go on to one of the premier Calder candidates for next year in Ryan Leonard of the Washington Capitals. Now, I think because of the Caps' depth and especially how many options they have in that top 6, I think Leonard most likely will be playing on the third line, which is a big reason why he's outside the top 5 for me. I think Leonard could pretty easily have a great rookie season, but kind of be more so like a Cutter Gauthier of last year, where he kind of takes a little bit of time to get going, especially what we saw at the start of his NHL career this last year, where it was a massive inconsistency. He only got 1 goal, 1 point in 9 games, didn't really look all that great. In the playoffs looked okay, but nothing exceptional yet. I think it'll be a little bit of a slow burn throughout this next year, but in the second half, really start to get his feet going and be a big part of the Capitals playoff roster if they were to make it. We'll see though, because Leonard has always been a pretty projectable player in all respects, so maybe we just see him get a little bit more comfortable, and that's really all it might take. But now let's go on to my top 5 Calder candidates for the 2026 season, and let's go on to Sam Renzel of the Chicago Blackhawks, somebody that I have a lot of faith in being one of the big success stories for the Blackhawks this next year. And it's based on a lot of things. I think Renzel has really improved since his draft year in a lot of key areas with the intensity, with the skating, and the offensive game. He's somebody that's really come a ways from kind of the raw game that he was showing in 2022, but somebody that I thought was exceptional for the Blackhawks in the 9 games he played. 5 assists, 5 points in 9 games, but I thought looked really comfortable there and immediately looked like a 10-year NHL veteran. He was just immediately a big part of that team. The chemistry was there already. It just felt like a seamless transition, and I expected that to continue, especially once this next season starts back up. I think Renzel's going to surprise a lot of people and be one of the bigger success stories for the Blackhawks. I could pretty easily see him as a defenseman, maybe getting around 40 points or so, which especially for a rookie defenseman is pretty fantastic to see. But moving on to number 4, we're going to go on to another Central Division Calder candidate here in Jimmy Snuggerud of the St. Louis Blues. Now, like Renzel, a big thing for Snuggerud I think is going to be the opportunity he's immediately given, because right now I think he's pretty easily within a top 6 spot on that Blues roster. A big thing for me with Calder candidates is opportunity. How much time on ice are they going to get? How much power play minutes are they going to receive? That could really be a make or break difference in terms of the production we see at the end of the day. But I think Snuggerud is really in line to get the full red carpet treatment in St. Louis, and there's really no reason why he shouldn't. He's somebody that's been an unbelievable player for Minnesota, and transitioning out of the Blues was immediately a core piece of that team, both in the regular season and especially in the playoffs, where I thought he was one of the best St. Louis Blues. He's always somebody that has had unbelievable talent, but he's been able to put it together so effortlessly over these past few years and really look like a core part of that Blues future. We're going to start to see him really explode, though, starting this fall. At number 3, we're going to go on to a defenseman I have a lot of confidence in, both as a prospect and as a player long-term for the Calgary Flames. Let's go on to Zayn Perk. Now, to me, this top 3 is absolutely loaded, and I don't think there's much difference between these 3 players, but Zayn Perk is somebody that I think checks all the boxes. A top-tier prospect who I absolutely adore, who's gotten better over the last year and a half since he's been drafted, but I think also is going to have a massive opportunity for that Calgary Flames defense. You see in the game he played, he had 1 goal, 1 point, I thought looked exceptional in that game, and I think he's going to carry that over pretty well. I see Zayn Perk putting up fantastic offensive numbers, maybe having some defensive deficiencies here and there, especially against the rush, but I think that will eventually be made up for with the offense he's able to provide immediately. I could pretty easily see Zayn Perk maybe getting around 50, 55 points or so, being immediately an impact offensive D as a rookie, and being exactly what Calgary needs more of, because especially in the back end, they need excitement, which just brings so much opportunity for Perk to be able to fill that hole. Now, going on to my number 2 Calder candidate for this next year, we go into a player that's also pretty similar in terms of the potential, what they bring to their teams, and what that team needs a lot more of, because at number 2, I have Z Buem of the Minnesota Wild. I think Buem's going to be the success story of this Minnesota roster this next year, and really the biggest thing that propels them maybe a bigger direction for the future. I mean, Buem is somebody that I think has been a top-tier prospect for a while, but is starting to get the attention for that. It's a shame that he was drafted at 12th overall, because it was way way lower than I think he should have been. Even though there were some defensive question marks, I think this last year in Denver, he was really able to solidify a lot of it and look a lot cleaner in his game, especially behind the net. He's somebody, though, that with the offensive game, the confidence, the perimeter play along the blue line, he is just a wizard out there with the confidence he presents. And I think especially for Minnesota, I mean, we talked about Calgary needing a player like Perek. The Minnesota has needed a player like Zebulon for a long time. And I think he's going to get a massive opportunity as that lefty. Could potentially be the pair of Brock Faber down the line in the NHL year. And I could see those two doing wonders together. But I think Bjorn's going to have a massive season, really feast off the great players in Minnesota like Kirill Kaprizov, get a lot from that connection, and maybe even hit 55, 60 points as a defenseman. And I think as a rookie, it's possible. Maybe not that much, but I think he's going to be a great one in year one. But let's go on to the number one Calder candidate for me and the player that is the most likely to dominate, while I think having the best chances of actually winning it by the end. Let's go on to my number one and Ivon Demadov of the Montreal Canadiens. You probably already predicted this, and you'd be correct. Because to me, I don't think anybody is nearly as locked for a top-tier spot on their team, while also filling a hole, while also getting top power play minutes, while also being one of the best prospects in the NHL, while also bringing as much as Demidov has already, and as much confidence to his team as he already has. I think Demidov is going to have a transformative rookie season, and one of the best we've seen over the last few years. I wouldn't count out 70-plus points potentially, maybe even a bit more than that, just because I think he is just tailor-made for this Montreal team already. Even though he wasn't a brilliant playoff player or anything, in the 2 regular season games he played, he was Montreal's best player, and that features some pretty good players on a team that made the playoffs. Demidov was just immediately showing the creativity and the game-breaking skill that he's able to present in every single shift. I think that's going to continue. I think that confidence and that swagger is going to propel him to a major position in Montreal's lineup, and it's about time, man, that Montreal's had a talent like Ivon Demadov, because he's going to be one of the best in the NHL in no time flat. I think there will be a debate in the Calder Trophy race, because I think there's going to be some seriously amazing defensemen in this class. But I think Demidov is just going to be too good and too consistent throughout this season that it's just not going to be much of a question by the end. Demidov, I think, has all the makings of a Calder winner, and as of right now, even though he's not the by far pick for me by any means, the Calder Trophy race can always fluctuate. Demidov, to me, is my front runner. But those are my Calder Trophy rankings for the 2026 season, and of course, even though I have my rankings with this, it could always change. A player like Oliver Moore could be an everyday player for the Blackhawks next year and really surprise us there. So obviously take these rankings with a grain of salt, but these are just how I'm seeing these guys projected the NHL next year and how well they could end up doing. But of course, with my rankings, I want to know down below for you guys. What are your rankings for the Calder Trophy this next year? What do you think the top 3 could end up looking like? Who do you see winning it? Is it a Demidov? Is it a Buem? Is it a Perek? Is it a Snuggerud? Let me know your thoughts down below there. And of course, make sure you share it with all the hockey fans you guys know online. Get the Calder picks out to them. And click on this card too if you want to watch some more hockey prospect videos just like this. And I will see you guys in the next one. Make sure you have a fantastic hockey day. And goodbye.